Hello and welcome. The focus of this video is dialectical journal entries. Dialectical journal entries are a way for we as people to respond to a text. And I'm not talking about a text message. I'm talking about either a newspaper article, an online article, a book, a chapter. And it doesn't just have to be for English. You could be reading something in your anatomy class. You could be reading something in your world religions class or US history class. Whatever the case is, dialectical journal entries are a way for you to not only understand and dive deeper into the text, but it's a way for you to connect with it. So let's get started. All right, I have created 12 handouts to go along with this video. And those handouts include examples, teacher instructions, student examples, a sample article. And so we're going to go through all of those items. So let's start here. On this document, you see that I basically have a left side and a right side. And so here's what we do. On the left side, you're going to include a quote. You're going to copy it exactly. And if the page or the line numbers are listed, then include that as well, because obviously you'll need that when you go back to cite this quote or this evidence. On the right side, we're going to do three things for every quote. The first is you're going to paraphrase the context, right? So basically, you've copied the quote over here, but over here for number one, put it in your own words and context. Context is you explaining what's happening either in that paragraph or on that page that leads up to the specific quote that you selected. The second item is analysis, right? Sometimes you will hear people call that commentary. So basically, analysis is what does this quote reveal about life, about science, about human nature, whatever the case is, whatever the content of your text is. And why does this matter? Now, it says note devices because if you're reading a piece of literature, it could be that you have just come across a piece of imagery that has a strong impact, or maybe the author used hyperbole, right? So in the event that you see some kind of figurative language or literary device, you would also address that in item number 2. And then finally, for number 3, you as the student are going to make some kind of a connection to the quote that you selected and or ask a question. All right. So you've got 3 items on this side, all 3 items for one quote. And so let's take a look over here so that you can see what that looks like. So again, here's my chart. I've got what we put in the left corner and then what we have in the right. So let's take a look at this example in more detail. Here's the quote. He watched the waves, counting each one as if it were a small betrayal. And let's pretend that that's on page 4 of whatever text we're using. So notice we're going to have this 1, 2, 3, and you can see I've done that. Same row. So all 3 of these things for the one quote. So the first one is the paraphrase and the context. So number 1, the man is standing on the beach watching the waves come in. Well, yeah, that's a good paraphrase and it provides context. Okay, so what's happening? Oh, this guy is there. He's watching the waves. All right, we can understand that. Number 2, analysis, what it reveals and why it matters. So for number 2, we have this. Calling each wave a small betrayal shows his mistrust and emotional pain. The sea feels like an enemy to him. Right? So it doesn't say that in the text, but I, as the student, that's what I'm inferring. That's what I'm able to recognize from this quote within this text. And then number 3, I'm going to make a connection and or ask a question. So here I have, I wonder what happened to make him feel this way about the ocean. Yeah, I'd be curious. Why is this guy upset with the ocean? Because I know personally I love it and I'm happy to go swim in it. So that's my question. That's my connection. All right, let's continue. Now, on this page, I have a little more information about how to do an entry, and then we'll also look at some sentence starters. So here we go. Let's start here. So basically, you want to have your one sentence paraphrase, you want to have 2 to 4 sentences of analysis, and you want to have either one connection or question. And the reason for having 2 to 4 sentences of analysis is because you might end up participating in a Socratic seminar or a small class discussion, or you might have to write a paragraph or an essay. And so when you provide your analysis on your dialectical journal entry, in essence, what you're doing is you're also reminding yourself 2 weeks later, or whatever the case may be, of what you thought, right? Have you ever had the experience where you go to write something and you're thinking, I know I had an opinion about this, but what was it? I know I did when I was a student. And so by doing your analysis on your entry, then when you go back to use it, it will come back to you, right? So here is another example, or that same example, but here I just have it typed for you. Because if you want, you might be someone who likes to type your notes, so then you could type your entries as well. Let's look at some sentence starters, sorry. So for the paraphrase part, right, which is the number 1, you could say, in other words, this means, or the character is. Now, once you get to a point where you're comfortable paraphrasing, then obviously you don't have to use these sentence starters. But in the meantime, that might really help you. Okay? Analysis. Since the analysis is, what you think about this, what does it reveal? These are ways that you could start your analysis. And then same with connections and questions, right? This reminds me of, or I wonder why, or this connects to the theme of. So these are really nice, helpful ways for you to get started if doing dialectical journal entries is a new skill for you. All right, and then there is a practice activity, and so these instructions are included on the handout. Let's look at the next 2 items. Okay, how to create and organize your dialectical journals. Let's zoom in a little bit. So again, each row in a dialectical journal, you're going to have one quote and your response, which has those 3 parts. That's all one complete entry. So for shorter readings, probably 4 to 6 rows per page is ideal. That gives you enough space to write meaningful responses. So in other words, if you're reading, let's say, 3 pages of a short story or a novel or a scene in a play, then you could probably come up with, and should come up with, between 4 to 6 quotes. And then for each of those quotes, you have those 3 items. And then you've got information if you're, having to annotate an entire chapter or a longer short story. All right. And then again, I just had this here as a reminder that you're doing all 3 of these. You're paraphrasing and providing context, you're providing analysis, and you're doing a connection or a question for each quote. Okay, and we'll continue. So this is a practice dialectical journal, and what I have here is a 450 word article about why taking good notes matter. So you're going to actually use this document. And so on the left side, I've got this reminder for you. You're going to put your quotes. So you'll do 3 quotes for this practice activity. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to do 1, 2, and 3 for each of them. So 1, 2, and 3 for your first quote, 1, 2, and 3 for your second, and so on. Okay, so this is fiction. I'm sorry, this is nonfiction, right? Because this is an article about why taking good notes matter. But sometimes authors will use figurative language and literary devices to communicate their message. And so for this particular article, I did that. So you're actually going to have 3 literary devices. And so I want you to see if you can identify those as you go through and read this article. So it's called Why Taking Good Notes Matter. And that continues on to the next page. So here is the second part of that. So there are 4 more paragraphs. And again, you'll read that and then you can select 3 items from it and do dialectical journal entries. And then here I've got some notes for you. And then a space where you can write down any notes that you have from watching this video or anything that you've seen so far that relate to dialectical journals. And then what I also have here is I have a sample response. So that article that you'll read, come back after and look to see what I have. Look to see what 3 quotes I selected and what I did for each of those. And so that should help you understand how to do dialectical journal entries. So have a great day and happy reading. Thank you.